Well, I very much hope you're enjoying our day of live shows here on May the 16th. It's certainly the time that those of us here in the UK would wish to be over in Dayton, Ohio, and meeting customers, old and new. But that's not to be this year. So we're doing the next best thing, and hopefully you're enjoying the demos. We've got live demos, and we're very pleased to have a joint effort here with HRO, and that's Katie over there on the right, who'll be coming back in a minute when we start up the next show. Also, you'll be seeing some of the key contributors here from SDR Play are over here on the left-hand side. There's Mike at the back there, and he's based in Florida. There's Andy over here in the UK and Steve from Dallas, Texas. I'm John, and I'm also based in the UK. So we're your guides for the day. And as I say, we'll be back very shortly with more live presentations and a chance for you to ask your questions. So a little bit about SDR Play, and for those of you who perhaps have come across this for the first time, so SDR Play, we make an SDR receiver, and it's essentially a box which you just need an antenna and a computer to create a general coverage receiver which goes all the way from 1 kilohertz up to 2 gigahertz. Unlike some of the cheaper dongles, there's no up converters needed, and it also has a lot of built-in hardware filters to really minimize the kind of problems you can have with a wideband SDR. This keeps a lot of the sort of phantom signals away, and the key thing for those of you who haven't played with SDR before, I would say the biggest difference compared with a traditional radio is the fact you can visualize the signals. You can actually see them as well as tune to them and pick up the signals. So here at SDR Play, we make the radios, the RSPs we call them, radio spectrum processors, and we'll be talking in a moment about the different models available. So we provide the hardware, we provide the API software which controls it, and we also provide SDR Uno SDR software. So this is the RSP-1A, which is our value product. We've done everything we can to keep the cost to a minimum. Some of you may remember the old RSP-1. This is a major upgrade to our original RSP-1, which came out nearly 6 years ago. As with all our RSPs, they give performance from 1 kilohertz all the way to 2 gigahertz, and you can visualize up to 10 megahertz of spectrum anywhere within that range. So 1 kilohertz is right down at VLF, 2 gigahertz is up into microwaves, and if you imagine, you're basically able to tune into and look at any 10 megahertz slot within that spectrum. And with all our RSPs, you have the capability of using it as a serious piece of RF kit. A very popular capability, together with our RSP Duo software, is the ability to use it as a versatile RF power measurement or field strength meter. Literally, you can take a portable laptop, take any of the RSPs out in the field. With our SDR Uno software, you can measure the absolute RF power being presented to the 50 ohm input at the RSP, and that accuracy is within around 1 dB. So you're within 1 dBm of the exact power being presented. This is great for comparing antennas, for looking at the signal strength out in the field. Another popular application is a totally separate spectrum analyzer software that we have available for all the RSPs. The DX version is imminent right now. If it's not there today, it'll be there very, very soon from the developer over in Australia, Steve Andrew, who's made a super job of providing this this software, which again it works on even the RSP 1A. Another popular capability is the GNU Radio Companion software, which is very good for research, experimentation. It's popular in universities for learning about signal processing. And we have, again, via third-party collaborators, there are source blocks for each of the RSPs to allow you to just treat the RSP as the radio block and then go on to do all sorts of manipulations with the signal path based on the growing library of blocks available out there as part of the whole sort of GNU radio effort. And now we come to the RSPDX. The RSPDX is a complete redesign of the popular RSP2, RSP2 Pro. Again, we get the 1 kHz to 2 GHz coverage with up to 10 MHz of spectrum visibility. But we have 3 antenna ports. To really do justice to the entire range from LF up to microwaves, it's not really practical to have one antenna for all those frequencies. So you typically need multiple antennas if you want to easily tune from one end to the other. And so the ability to switch between antennas using the software is very powerful. So we've come up with choice of 3 antenna ports. 2 of them are these SMA 50 ohm ports. There's also a 50 ohm BNC port, which is up to 200 megahertz. It's limited to 200 megahertz simply because of the performance of the BNC sockets at the higher frequencies, but also we've been able to make a slightly more rugged protection for those lower frequencies. There's enhanced HF performance compared to the older design of the RSP2, particularly for large signal handling, but additionally we've added additional hardware and software filtering below 2 MHz, specifically for the challenging conditions involved down at MF and LF. So this does give outstanding performance using what we call HDR, the high dynamic range mode, which, as I say, it uses a combination of the additional hardware filtering and also the software filtering within SDR Uno. And the whole thing comes in a very, very rugged black steel case, which really feels very solid, as well as having the external clock input for extra accuracy using a GPS-DO, which is typically useful up at UHF and beyond. So here's a little bit about the HDR mode for the RSPDX. So the way that works is in conjunction with SDR Uno Windows software, which we provide, and there are band buttons, which are shown here in the software, which whenever you select a band below 2 megahertz, it will automatically put you into the HDR mode. And here you can see the bands provided, which are just different spans within that spectrum from 1 kilohertz up to 2 megahertz. And they're kind of useful spans like the medium wave broadcast band, the long wave band, some bands for NDBs, and because there's a filter at 500 kilohertz, there's a choice of either having it kicked in or not for extra resilience down at these very, very challenging LF frequencies. So this then takes us to our flagship product, the RSP Duo, which is a dual tuner version of the RSP. Again, it has multiple antenna ports. This time, instead of a BNC, it has a high impedance port, which allows you to connect directly to either a wire antenna or a balanced feed. It just eliminates the need for one external balun. So that's the third antenna option on the RSP Duo. But the key extra features embedded within the Duo is the fact it's two independent tuners. So if you remember, the other RSPs give you total visibility, or 10 megahertz visibility, anywhere between 1 kilohertz and 2 gigahertz. Well, you still get that with the RSP Duo, but you'll see over here it's got essentially two tuners, duplicate banks of filters and two tuners. So this means that you can get up to 2 megahertz visibility in two different places in the entire spectrum. So you could actually be on down at 40 meters with one and up on 70 centimeters with another. I'll give a few more examples of where this comes into effect. Probably the next most exciting thing about the Duo is the ability to do diversity reception. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment. So here, just showing how the Duo has the two independent tuners, and of course everything goes through one USB interface, which is why we've had to limit it to two chunks of 2 megahertz, because otherwise you just can't get the throughput down the USB cable. But as I say, this gives the opportunity for signal enhancement and noise cancelling diversity applications, as well as monitoring two totally widely spaced bands as shown in this example. So you actually have two versions, or two instances of SDR Uno running simultaneously and totally independently able to tune. In this example, we're looking up at the aircraft band as well as at 40 meters. Another great application is for those aircraft enthusiasts who want to simultaneously listen to the air traffic control transmissions down on 120 megahertz, the VHF AM transmissions, as well as doing ADS-B detection and looking at the telemetry data up at 1.09 gigahertz. You can have the two things going on simultaneously. When it comes to diversity, the key addition in the SDR Uno software is this rosette display here, which allows you to control by dragging the end of this line here, which is representing the relative phase of signal on tuner 1 to the signal on tuner 2. And the absolute length of this line, if it's set to the center, you've got unity, you've got the two signals of equal amplitude, and you go to a 2-to-1 ratio if you go fully out, and half to 1 if you go the other way. So this, again, this is just for the RSP Duo. This won't work with the single tuner 1A or the DX. And the way this works is once you select tuner mode and diversity mode, it will automatically give you the ability to get maximum ratio combination for signal enhancement. So the software will do real-time measurements on the signal and try and compare and maximize the two together. Now this works very predictably up at VHF and above, where the type of signal paths are much more direct, and tend to be fairly stable, apart from sporadic E events and very nearby big aircraft. But down at HF, it's where it comes into its own is to combine fast changing signals from, say, a horizontal antenna and a vertical, or two differently oriented horizontal antennas. Obviously the spacings get quite big down at HF, but it's really impressive to see and hear the effect of when the two signals are fading in and out rapidly. You can actually maintain and hear a very good, much easier to read signal. And then the next capability is interference rejection. And when it comes to using RSP Duo diversity for cancelling like local interference, then you have on one tuner, you typically have an antenna set to pick up the best possible signal, and then the second antenna, as long as it has some of the good signal, it needs some of the good signal there, but is perhaps picking up all the noise. The two together can be used using diversity in manual mode to phase away the unwanted signal, and again this is very effective. So anyway, let's just recap on the three different models that we have: the RSP-1A, the RSP-DX, and the RSP Duo. This chart, which is again, it's available on our website, really highlights the basic features you get for the RSP-1A, which gives you all the core capabilities. It then goes on to show how the DX has the extra rugged metal case. It has the external clocking capability. It has this special mode for below 2 megahertz. So that's the RSP DX. And then on top of that, the Duo brings you dual tuners, simultaneous processing of two completely separate parts of the spectrum, along with the ability to do diversity tuning. So that's those are the RSPs, and then of course the software is constantly evolving. So if you get an RSP today, the capability you'll get with the SDR Uno software will be evolving over time, new capabilities coming in, and a lot of the third-party software is improving as well. So it's constantly being refreshed. So this is what SDR Uno looks like. A lot of separate panels which automatically tessellate onto your size of Windows display. This looks particularly good if you put it on a big HDMI monitor. You have a main control panel, which is your main interface to the RSP itself, and a lot of drop-down options. And we really encourage you today to take time to ask questions if you're already a user and want to understand more. If you're thinking about using SDR Uno, to ask questions. But the look and feel of SDR Uno is to mimic traditional radio. Here's the receiver control panel with the frequency readout in the center, and you can control all these the frequency with the roller wheel on your mouse, which becomes a bit like your tuning knob, or you can individually scroll through different digits. You can select the particular mode for decode, whether it's FM or AM, and then SSB, lower sideband. There's a bunch of filter options with some sensible defaults already preset. There's an extra control panel with powerful noise filtering capabilities. The main part of the display is the spectrum window itself, where you visualize the signals across the spectrum, and through time that forms the waterfall below. There's a recording function, there's a scanning function, and there's the ability to manipulate the decoded demodulated signal in this SP2 window here. So there's a lot to get into, but there's very good documentation, and as you'll see later, a bunch of help in the way of videos that you can look at. Within that receiver window, there are the or the band buttons, where you can select from ham or broadcast bands, and these are preset bands where the framing and all the settings has been worked out in advance. So you literally might choose the ham lower set of bands, which goes all the way from the experimental 2200 meter band up to 15 meters. We're going to pick on, say, 20 meters in this example, and once you click on that, then your main spectrum window is automatically set to span from 14 megs to 14.35, so you don't have any further adjustments to do. And here now is our Windows-based SDR Uno roadmap, which takes us all the way through to version 2, which a lot of people are waiting for, where we eventually migrate across to run on some of the other popular computing platforms, particularly Mac OS, Linux. So a whole bunch of improvements, additions, capabilities. In 1.4, probably the plugin capability is going to be the most dramatic in terms of opening up the ability to work with other third-party software without always having to use a virtual audio cable or some kind of intermediary software. So that will give a much more cohesive feel to many of the applications which today are, clearly separate. When it comes to applications, obviously this is very much a ham radio day as we celebrate hamvention and Dayton and kind of really nostalgically missing it. And this is, as I said, our attempt to just bring a live day of demos and be able to answer your questions just as though you were with us at Dayton. And in the next chat session, we really encourage you to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. But like I say, it's mostly ham radio, but there are other applications of just having such a great general coverage receiver, which a bit like a Swiss Army knife opens up the possibility to try things that maybe have been out of reach. So I've just listed some of them here. And satellite comms is probably one of the areas, satellite imaging, and so on. And I'm going to go on and show a few pictorial examples of this. So let's take a look. But before we do that, I just should mention what a lot of people use their dongles for, and also the RSP1A in particular, is as a pan adapter. A panoramic spectrum adapter for an existing transceiver, and the RSPs, all of them work really well with all the popular radios, the Yaesus, the Kenwoods, and we do have some great videos which I'll come to later that show you how you can set these up and give you the ability to simultaneously control. You can simultaneously control your rig from the SDR Uno software. So with your mouse click, when you see a signal, you click on it and it resets the frequency on your rig, and vice versa. So that's obviously a very, very popular use of an RSP. But as I was saying, there's a lot of other things outside ham radio that are of great interest to anyone who likes to explore what's out there in the spectrum. And there's Inmarsat signals that can be picked up with a very simple patch antenna. This one is supplied by SDR Kits. It's dedicated to this 1.6 gigahertz part of the spectrum. And you can pick up all sorts of messaging information, particularly from ships at sea and that kind of thing. Here's just an example of the fact with SDR Uno you can simultaneously explore different frequencies, have each of these virtual receivers set up to pipe to a different application. So it could be WSJT, it could be some sort of WeFax decode. There's limitless possibilities. And here's a great example of a surveying satellite image. And these are really high resolution images that you can access up on 1.7 gigahertz. With all our hardware and software products, we've tried to do as much as we can to provide guides as well as the documentation around SDR Uno and the API, which are the two key things that we provide with our hardware. We've put links to other software as well, and we have both on our website www.sdrplay.com. If you go to support, you can find the applications and support catalog where you can search by keyword. You can find videos on a wide range of topics to help you, as well as on our YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and select SDR Play, you'll find our YouTube channel, which is full of links and playlists to various aspects, including in other languages as well. We also have a second YouTube channel, which is called SDR Play Ham Guides, which is run by Mike over in Florida. And this is a very informal channel where Mike personally will respond to comments and quite quickly come up with new videos and content for his regular Zoom events. It's a little bit informal, and it's growing and very, very popular. So that's the SDR Play Ham Guides YouTube channel. We have a Facebook news page where we publish news and information, not to be confused with the SDR Play Facebook community group, or the group with now 13,000 members. This is a group that was started. Mike was involved right at the beginning, but also Paul Jones has to stand out as the pioneering enthusiast of our product before anyone had heard of it, and he sort of stayed with it throughout. And he's a great friend of SDR Play, and he works for ELAD, which is a very great companion company complementing what we do. And like I say, we're very, very pleased to see that we're over 13,000 members. So you can post a question here and expect to get some comments and replies pretty quickly, which all helps. We've also got a forum. Again, we're very much indebted to Rick King in particular for managing this forum, which is perhaps better for those of you who don't want to use Facebook. There's also now a Groups.io forum, which has just started this year. I should just add that was NB4R, Ruben, who we have to thank for the new group that was started this year, the Groups.io. So with all our products, you can get direct support from SDR Play. Doesn't matter if you buy it from HRO or direct. You can get technical support from our support center. You can raise a ticket, and we will do our best to support you. Obviously, our main capability is obviously our hardware. We stand by that. We'll support you any questions or problems you have with the hardware, and also the SDR Uno software and the API. But some of the third-party stuff is obviously outside our expertise, but we'll do our best to give you pointers. So, we really try and turn around our tickets as quickly as possible. We are limited to English speaking. We are somewhat limited to UK and US hours, but again, it's something that we're trying to constantly improve and learn from, and build in any problem areas, and improve our documentation, improve our website, improve future upgrades to our software. So Anyway, with that, I just want to say how pleased we are to be at least able to have some time sharing our products with you, even though there's no datum, there's no Hamvention today. We're with you, we're online, we're going to be back at the time shown below for the next round of demonstrations and a chance for you to ask your questions, and looking forward to it. It's a really, really good day, and as good as we could do without actually getting over there with you. So anyway, with that, 73s.